everyone, my name is Tyler.
And I'm Jade.
And this is Fairy Tales Part 2. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about some fairy tales around the campfire, which I swear is here. And our first fairy tale is actually Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Yay! Snow White. A queen wished for a child that was as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony wood. She then had a daughter and named her Snow White. The queen died after Snow White was born. So the king got a new wife that was really arrogant and didn't want anyone to surpass her beauty. She had a magic mirror and would ask every morning, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of them all?" And it said, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." And then Snow White had grown up and was very beautiful. So the queen asked the mirror again, and the mirror said, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you."
Sounds like my life.
The queen grew with envy and ordered the huntsman to take Snow White out to the woods and kill her. Snow White begged for the man not to kill her, so she ran away into the woods. She found a house where there were 7 of everything. After looking around, she fell asleep in one of the beds. There were 7 dwarves that lived in the house and found Snow White sleeping, and they were all amazed. The 7 dwarves let her stay if she did housework and cooked for them. The queen asked the mirror again, and the mirror told her that she was with the 7 dwarves. So the queen then disguised herself as an old person, and she put it on Snow White, but put it on too tight to where she could not breathe. And then she left. When she found out that she did not die, she came back again with a poisonous comb. And then Snow White, and then again she was unconscious.
Yeah.
But she didn't die again. And so that made the queen very angry. So then the queen made a poisonous apple to bring to her.
Finally.
And then she took a bite and fell dead. A prince came to the house for shelter and saw Snow White and asked for her. The dwarves gave her to him. His servant tripped on something
Loser.
that hit his throat and got the apple out, and Snow White was alive again.
Oh my god. What good luck.
She married the prince, and the queen came to the wedding when she found out it was Snow White. They put iron shoes into hot coals and placed them on the queen's feet, and then she danced on it until she danced dead.
Oh.
That's the end.
Wow. What a fun story.
I know.
You know what? I think I have an even better story, though. Hansel and Gretel. So, this story starts out with a man and his wife who have 2 German children named Hansel and Gretel. And so this family is like dirt poor, like 5th Ward poor. And so they're in the house, they're like starving to death. And the wife is like, "Hey, we can't keep these kids anymore. Like, we need to look out for ourselves." And the husband's like, "I don't know. I kind of like the kids." And then she's like, "No." So the kids hearing this are like, "The heck, Mom?" And so the mom the next day leads the children into the woods. But Hansel, being the awesome, smart kid like he is, and every time they get to a certain place so that they can find their way back. So when they get to a certain point in the woods, the mom says, "Okay, just stay here. We'll come get you in the morning." And so they're like, "Hey, Mom, whatever." So she leaves, doesn't come back. So then the kids find their way back home. And so when they come back in the morning, the parents are like, "Oh, hey, what you doing here?" And they're like, "We found you." And they're like, "Yeah." And so then the wife, the next morning, is like, "We gotta get rid of those kids, though." And so she takes them back out, but she checks to make sure they don't have anything with them. All she gives them is this, like, horrible little piece of bread. And so Hansel being the cool kid that he is, rips up the bread and puts it along the path so that they don't die and they can find their way back home. But what he doesn't realize is the birds eat all the bread. Yeah, I know, ratch birds. And so they can't find their way back. So they're stuck in this forest, starving to death, and they see this beautiful house made out of candy and food and luxury, and they go up to the house, like, oh, inside and crap, like eating like everything. And so this old woman appears, and she's like, "Hey, oh, you guys look so hungry. Why don't you just stay here and eat and chill?" And so they're like, "Oh my God, this old lady is like perfect." And so she's almost as perfect as Miss Viegas. And then um, and so what they don't realize is that the old lady is actually an evil witch who wants to eat them. So what they do is that she starts feeding them until they get fatter and fatter. And then one morning they wake up and she's locked Hansel in this like little gritty box, and she's like, "Gretel, you little girl, like you need to cook for Hansel, make him fat so I can eat him." And so Hansel's hungry, so he's of course gonna eat. And so Gretel gives him like a chicken bone because the over every finger to see if he's getting fatter. And so he'll stick out the chicken bone and be all like, "Here's my finger." And she'll be like, "Oh, you're too skinny. Gonna have to keep waiting." And so eventually she gets tired of this and she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna eat you even if you're anorexic." So she decides to get Hansel out. But before she does that, she has to heat up the oven. And she's like, "Gretel, heat up the oven for me." And Gretel's like, "I don't know how to." And so the witch is like, "Here, let me show you." And she goes over to the oven, and then Gretel, the kid that she is, puts in the oven, she burns the witch to death. And they get to live in that house full of candy, like cool kids. And so they're just chilling the whole time. And that is the story of Hansel and Gretel.
Woo!
I think the next story is called The Ugly Duckling.
Yay!
Sounds like my family.
Ew. Okay, The Ugly Duckling. When the tale begins, a mother duck's eggs hatch. One of the little birds is perceived by the other birds and animals on the farm as a homely little creature that suffers physical abuse. Sadly, and lives with wild ducks and geese and hunters until hunters slaughter the flock.
Oh my God.
I know. He finds a home with an old woman, but her cat and hen tease him
Mercilessly.
mercilessly, and again he sets off on his own. He sees a flock of migrating wild swans, and he's delighted and excited, but he cannot join them, for he's too young and cannot fly. Winter arrives. A farmer finds and carries the little freezing bird home, but the fondling is frightened by the farmer's noisy children and flees the house. He spends a miserable winter alone in the outdoors, mostly hiding in a cave on the lake that partly freezes over. When spring arrives, a flock of swans descend on the now thawing lake. The ugly duckling, now having fully grown and matured, cannot endure a life of solitude and hardship any more, and decides to throw himself at the flock of swans, deciding that it's better to be killed by such beautiful birds and have a life of ugliness and misery. He is shocked when the swans welcome and accept him, only to realize by looking at his reflection in the water that he has grown into one of them. The flock takes to the air ducklings, beautiful large wings, and takes flight with the rest of his new family.
That was so beautiful.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, so the next story we're gonna do is one that you're all pretty familiar with. It's called Little Red Riding Hood.
Little Red.
Actually, Little Red in the Hood is what it should be called. So there's this girl. There's this girl named Little Red, and her mom is like, "Hey, eating grandma." So she's like, "I'll go give her some cookies." So this little red girl By the way, she's not a ginger. She's just wearing a red cape. That's why she's referred to as Little Red. Okay. So, all the way through. Now, this is a really sketchy part of the woods. Like, super sketch. Alright. So, basically. So, she's going through the woods. And there's this wolf. And he's like, oh my god, she looks yummy in more than one way. So then, and then the wolf is like, hey, how are you, my dear? And the little red is like, hi there, Mr. Wolf. I'm just going to deliver these cookies to my grandma's house. And he's like, okay. And then he follows her to the grandma's house. But what she doesn't realize is that when she gets to the grandma's house, the wolf has eaten the grandma. He ate her. And so he put on the grandma's clothes and is sleeping in bed. When Little Red comes in, she's like, oh, Grandma, hey, what's up? And then she's like, come closer, my dear. And then she's like, okay. And so she comes closer, she's like, better to see you with my eyes, my dear. And so she's like, okay. So she comes closer. And then when she goes over to the wolf snaps up, chops her head off with his mouth and eats it. And he eats her. This was a tale originally made to, well, first before he eats her, he ravages her, aka rapes her, before he chops her head off. So he has some fun with her. And then, is that too bad?
No, it's okay.
It's what happened. So don't get mad at me. So then he eats her. He just like eats her whole, and they're dead. This tale was originally made to teach girls to not be promiscuous with people that they just meet. So.
And to stay away from strangers because they'll
eat you and ravage you.
They'll ravage you.
Yeah. Guys, too, don't. Sometimes. Okay, well, thank you guys. This has been Fairy Tales Part 2. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.